Welcome. Today we have a very interesting debate topic for you. As many immigrants from South and Central America who speak Spanish are coming to the United States, and with many more having settled there over the course of the past decades, a new language is on the rise. It's called Spanglish, and it's a hybrid language, a mixture of Spanish and English. And its growing importance raises the question: should this Spanish language be standardized? That is what we are going to debate today. We have several guests. First of all, Laurence. She is a speaker of Spanglish herself and a member of the Chicano community, which is a community of immigrants from Hispanic descent in the United States with a very typical identity. Then we have Ilke. She is a speaker of normal standard Spanish from Puerto Rico in the United States, and she opposes a standardization of Spanish. And last but not least, we have Lara. She's a linguist specialized in hybrid languages such as Spanglish, and she will provide more factual background to our debate. Laurence, let me start with you. What do you think is the main argument for standardizing Spanglish?
Well, I strongly believe that the standardization of Spanglish would contribute to reassert our cultural unique identity. And the importance of this is clearly shown in the fact that in the 1960s, in the Civil Rights Revolution, that we adopted the chosen identity of Chicano. There were various reasons which drove us to do so, and the main reason is formulated by many Chicano writers, and one of these writers was Ana Anzualdía, and she stated that we rather perceive our cultural identity as something unique, and with this unique identity this also goes hand in glove with a unique linguistic expression. So in that way, the standardization of Spanglish would legitimize the use of our own unique form of speech in more cultural spheres where non-standard varieties now are shunned.
Okay. Let us switch to the other side then. Ilke, what do you think is the main argument against a standardization of Spanglish?
Well, what Laurence just told us is one way of looking at it, but don't you think that there is too much variety for only one cultural entity? Because when standardizing a language, you have to select a variety on which you will focus in order to construct rules. So as I see it, when choosing only one variety of a whole culture, it means that you have to eliminate other varieties, and thereby you're discriminating groups instead of giving them their cultural identity.
Okay, maybe we should turn to our linguist now. Is this indeed correct? What she says is the great variation. Does this variation exist, and will it be an obstacle to standardizing Spanish?
Well, I'm not sure whether it will be an obstacle as such, but it is true that there's quite a bit of variation within Spanglish. Spanglish as a language is mostly spoken within the United States, where you have varieties between the different states, but also between different cities. And then there's the case of Puerto Rico, where you have even differences between the main island and then the smaller island of St. Croix. But other than that, Spanish is also spoken in many South American countries, such as, for instance, Panama, where it was introduced after the construction of the Panama Canal. All these different varieties of Spanglish have their own syntactic and semantic structure, so it would be quite true to say that there is a lot of variety within the language.
Oh, so a great deal of variation. Do you think that is the ultimate obstacle to standardizing?
Well, you won't hear me say that it will be easy to standardize Spanglish, but that was also the case with all the other languages which were standardized in the past. I mean, I know of this one particular example, which was spoken about in the UNESCO report filed in 1991 about the normalization of various national languages. And the national language of Mali, which resembles Spanglish in a lot of aspects, mostly because it also comprises different codified varieties, which oftentimes even interact with each other. But nonetheless, even though there is a great deal of variety within the language, they still manage to construct one standard variety. So it might be difficult to do so, but it is possible.
Yes, this is true, and I know the report you're talking about. It's the one about the standardization of national languages, which also gives the example of the Quechua language in Peru, where they had similar problems with a multitude of very distinct dialects, but they still managed to find a compromise and a way to standardize this language, so it is clearly possible.
Okay, so it would be hard but possible. What do you think are the other arguments for not standardizing Spanish?
Well, I definitely see your point, but I think this is also a matter of proficiency in languages, because the American poet Langston Hughes, he once said, these people wander as they wander without sense of direction. So what he means is that these people, the people who speak Spanglish, neither master the English nor the Spanish language completely. So they incorporate English words and constructions into their daily speech because they simply lack the vocabulary and training of Spanish, and thereby it's hard for them to adapt to the culture that surrounds them.
Okay, maybe we should turn to a linguist for a second. Do you agree with what Ilke said?
Well, no, I think it might be quite unscientific to put it that way, but maybe could you clarify with a concrete example?
Because this fact involves that the people who speak Spanglish are disadvantaged in their opportunities for employment. So it appears to me that it's better and more important to put effort in the education of two languages that are largely spoken all over the world, instead of standardizing a mixture of two languages that is only spoken in a rather small area.
Well, I don't quite agree with what you're saying, because don't you think it's a bit idealistic what you're saying? I mean, in theory, this might be true, but research conducted by Siegel in 2003 shows that the current methods used to educate children who speak a variety which is different from the standard one, the approaches used to educate them in this standard variety, they are failing. One of the examples which supports this claim, and which was also discussed in the report of Siegel, is an examination of the test results of the National Assessment Test of Educational Progress, and there he compared the test results of, on the one hand, the children who spoke at home a vernacular variety called Black Vernacular English, but were forced to adopt the standard variety in education, and on the other hand, the test results of the American children who received an education in their own variety. And these results showed that the children who were forced to adopt a variety different from their own scored significantly less good on all these general assessment tests than the children who could receive an education in their own variety. So to me, this strongly suggests that it would be more beneficial to standardize the vernacular variety in question, so that it might be, or that it would be possible to implement it in education, rather than focusing on letting them adopt the standard variety. Because if they were allowed to get an education in their own variety, they would have equal chances as their American counterparts.
Yes, I agree with what you're saying, and I believe this was also proven by the Oakland Resolution of 1996, which proposed the standardization of African American vernacular English and its use in education. And research from the Linguistic Society of America proved that children who were educated in their own variety scored higher on tests given in the standard variety. So it would be easier for children to be taught the standard variety in their own language.
Okay, so that seems like a good argument for standardization, but there is one problem that I want to talk about with you, and that is the question of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico is a territory of the United States where the vast majority of the people speak Spanish, so standard Spanish, and they are afraid that Spanglish and the standardization and more recognition for Spanglish would diminish the status of Spanish in the United States. I think you
yes,
know this as
exactly.
well.
That's so the fact that Spanglish is gaining importance and popularity in Puerto Rico, for example, is confirmed in the article Spanglish language in contact in Puerto Rico. But furthermore, there is the case of Professor Ulens who teaches Spanish at Amherst College and who is the most fervent promoter of Spanglish. He claims that there will be a radical change in Spanish and that eventually Spanglish will standardize the syntax of Spanish. He talks about the death of a language, Spanish, and the birth of another language, Spanglish. So to my mind, that would be a disaster. Can you imagine that the pure language of Cervantes would have to disappear because of a mixture of two languages?
Do you agree with your colleague?
No. I believe Professor Stevens is quite wrong with saying this. It is true that languages can be influenced by other languages. We've already seen this within the Spanish language when it came into contact with the Arabic language.
Yes.
However, Spanish, as of now, is such a widely spread language. It's the most spoken Romance language in the world. It's spoken in 21 different countries by roughly 400 million speakers. I believe Professor Stevens is wrong in saying this language could still die, at least at this point in time. I personally believe that right now it's so well established as a language, Spanish that is, that it would be quite preposterous to believe that a language such as Spanish, which you already mentioned is only spoken in quite a small area, could wipe out Spanish, which is spoken by such a large part of the population of our planet.
I totally agree with what you're saying.
Okay, so it could influence Spanish, but a total extinction of the other language would seem rather unlikely. I want to thank you all for this debate. It has been very interesting, and clearly the last word hasn't been said about this topic of standardization of Spanglish. So there is a lot still to be said, but I want to thank you all. Goodbye.